Coming to you live from the Tino Studios in Minooka, Illinois. I'm your host, Bucky Shanks, and this is Tino Tonight. Welcome everybody to the Week 9 edition of Tino Tonight. 8 weeks are down and 3 to go. Penn State, Rutgers, Florida, and Oregon State all hit career win number 10 last week. Congratulations, coaches. Tennessee, Iowa State, and UCLA remained perfect. Wake Forest and Iowa remained winless. But enough about that. It's time for the Squeak of the Week. This week's Squeaker takes us to Madison as the number 5 Penn State Nittany Lions came to town to do battle with the Wisconsin Badgers. Penn State got 101 out of Stephon Tuitt and 57 from Justin Herbert. Wisconsin would counter with 70 from Kenny Moore and 61 from Jason Pierre-Paul. But it wouldn't be enough as Penn State did something we may never see again. They won by 0.1. 917.45 to 917.35. The 0.1 point win is the closest win in Tino history. This record may stand for quite some time. Wisconsin was visibly sick on the sidelines after this one, and rightfully so. Wisconsin will look to salvage its season this week versus Nebraska. Penn State has a showdown with Michigan State. This week we only had one team meet the criteria. Georgia Tech gets this segment all to themselves. Since losing to Florida State in Week 6, the Yellow Jackets rebounded nicely with wins over number 12 Syracuse and number 16 North Carolina. Georgia Tech controls its own destiny with 3 weeks to play. If they win out, they will have a seat at the ACC title game. Next up to try to prevent that from happening is 2-6 NC State, who cannot afford any more losses if they want any shot at a bowl game. But now that we settled all that, we're going streaking.
And into the gymnasium. Come on, bring your green hat. We're streaking. We're streaking. Woo! Woo!
What the hell are you doing?
We're streaking.
UCLA tied Oklahoma's regular season win streak record at 10. The Bruins have a chance to take over that record if they can knock off Oregon this week. Their overall win streak has hit 8. Iowa State's regular season win streak is up to 9 and overall win streak is up to 8. They look to keep it going this week versus Oklahoma State. Iowa, losing to Rutgers, has them up to 13 losses in a row. Michigan is up next. And Wake Forest, losing to Florida State, has them up to 8 straight losses. Virginia Tech is up next. And that brings us to the updated, brand new Top 25. Coming in at 25, Washington 4-4. The Huskies rebounded from losing 2 straight by winning 2 straight. 2 games out in their quest for a Pac-12 title berth, they will need a lot of help to achieve that goal. The playoffs, however, they're still well within reach if they can continue this winning streak. They take on Colorado this week in what is a must-win for the Huskies. Number 24, Virginia Tech 4-4. The Hokies have now won 2 straight and have 2 teams still to go ahead of them in the standings. They will beat a tanking Wake Forest team this week, and then they have Georgia Tech and Syracuse, which will be huge games in the ACC. Number 23, Florida 4-4. The Gators entered Week 8 on a 2-game skid. They got back on the winning side by knocking off number 20 LSU. The Gators will need to finish strong if they want a shot at the playoffs. South Carolina is up next. Number 22, Arkansas 4-4. The Razorbacks have now won 2 straight and sit 5th in the SEC. They will be major players in who goes to the SEC title game as they play Mississippi State this week and have Tennessee ahead as well. Arkansas is alive and well for the SEC title game and the playoff berth. Number 21, North Carolina, 5-3. The Tar Heels' run of scoring 800 points and winning came to an end this week when they lost to Georgia Tech. The good news for the Heels, they finished the year with Notre Dame, Miami, and Wake Forest in games they will likely be favored. Number 20, Mississippi State 5-3. The Bulldogs have now dropped 2 straight and have really opened the door for the rest of the SEC. Arkansas is next in a big game in the SEC. Number 19, Oklahoma State 5-3. The Cowboys have won 3 out of 4 and have Iowa State and Baylor the next 2 weeks. The Cowboys have a chance to shake up the rankings and position themselves for a Big 12 title game berth if they can take care of business the next 2 weeks. Number 18, Ohio State 4-4. The Buckeyes have played 3 ranked teams in their last 5 games. They lost all 3, and the 2 wins were against tanking teams. Nobody has been harder to figure out than Ohio State. The committee respects the points this 4-4 squad is putting up as they are knocking on the door for a playoff berth. They take on Maryland next, who is 1-6 lifetime versus ranked schools. Number 17, Oregon 4-4. The Ducks got eaten alive by Golden Bears last week in an upset that nobody seen coming. Could have been looking ahead to this week as they take on number 1 UCLA. The Ducks close out with 3 competitive teams, so they will need to be on it if they want any shot at a return trip to the playoffs. And number 16, Colorado 4-4. The Buffaloes have lost 2 of 3 and now face a hungry Washington team in a must-win game. Colorado has hit must-win territory if they want to hang on to their current playoff seed. Number 15, Syracuse 5-3. The Orange rebounded from their loss to Georgia Tech by crushing NC State. Syracuse has Miami this week before a huge game with Florida State. They need to be careful not to look ahead, as that has tripped up a handful of teams this season. Number 14, Rutgers 5-3. The Scarlet Knights have now won 3 straight and face a tanking Purdue team this week. With Wisconsin and Nebraska to follow, Rutgers has a legit shot at the playoffs, and if a few things fall their way, they might find themselves in the Big Ten title game. Number 13, Auburn 5-3. The Tigers have now won 4 out of 5 and are right in the mix for a seat in the SEC title game. Currently positioned for the playoffs, they will take on Georgia this week. Number 12, Clemson 6-2. The Tigers have won 4 out of 5 and rebounded from the loss to North Carolina with a win over Notre Dame. Clemson controls its own destiny as they sit third in the ACC behind only Florida State, who they will play this week, and Georgia Tech, who they play in the season finale. Number 11, Florida State 6-2. The Seminoles have won 5 out of 6. Since the terrible Week 2 loss to Texas, the Seminoles have been knocking teams off left and right. They were upset by Miami, but they bounced back versus Wake Forest. Clemson is up next, followed by Syracuse. Big games coming in the ACC. Number 10, Michigan State 6-2. The Spartans, similar to the Tar Heels, have won a couple of games this year, scoring very low point totals. This team has only scored 7,496 on the year, so this team has a very overrated feel to them. We're going to find out all we need to know the next 2 weeks. They take on Penn State and Michigan. But every time Bucky runs his mouth, that team responds. Let's see if Sparty follows suit. Number 9, Arizona State 7-1. The Sun Devils bounced back from the loss to Colorado by beating Washington State. Arizona State has a 2-game lead over third place in the conference. USC and Arizona are up next before the showdown with UCLA in the finale. Number 8, Georgia Tech 6-2. The Yellow Jackets were moving and shaking earlier tonight. They will take on NC State as the Yellow Jackets close in on their first ACC title appearance. Number 7, Michigan 6-2. The Wolverines have won 2 straight and get a tanking Iowa team next. A huge game with Michigan State the week after. And number 6, Baylor 7-1. The Bears bounced back from the loss to Iowa State by beating number 23 West Virginia. A couple of tough games with both Oklahoma schools are on deck for the Bears. Ultimately, the Bears' chances at the Big 12 title game come down to the Iowa State-Kansas game in the season finale. Number 5, Penn State 7-1. The Nittany Lions, aka a little squeaky, survived Wisconsin in literally the slimmest of margins this league has ever seen, taking surviving in advance way too literally. Penn State gets Michigan State next, who will be ready to go after Bucky running his mouth. Number 4, Kansas 7-1. The Jayhawks have won 3 straight since the loss to Baylor. Kansas State and Texas are the next 2 up. In games Tyler and the Jayhawks will be heavily favored. Their playoff spot is all but clinched at this point. The season finale with Iowa State is shaping up to be huge for seeding and who goes to the Big 12 title game. Number 3, Iowa State 8-0. The Cyclones continue to roll, scoring at least 1,100 points in each of the last 3 weeks. The offense is firing on all cylinders, and this team is a real threat for the national championship. Oklahoma State is up next in a game the Cowboys desperately need. Number 2, Tennessee 8-0. The Volunteers remain perfect after beating Mississippi State. They have scored over 1,000 points in 6 of their 8 games this year. The Volunteers take on LSU this week. And number 1, UCLA 8-0. The Bruins have scored over 1,000 points in 7 of their 8 games and have scored 9,000 points in 8 games. Just fascinating numbers. They take on Oregon this week in a game the Ducks must have. And that brings us to our games of the week. Number 11, Florida State versus number 12, Clemson. An absolute must-win for both teams. Clemson would overtake Florida State and position themselves for a seat in the ACC title game with a win. Florida State will all but clinch a seat in the ACC title game if they win. Number 5, Penn State versus number 10, Michigan State. Penn State can all but clinch their spot in the Big Ten title game with a win. Michigan State has to have this one to keep pace with Michigan. Number 3, Iowa State versus number 19, Oklahoma State. Iowa State needs this win to keep Kansas and Baylor at bay. Oklahoma State has won 2 straight and is knocking on the door of a playoff berth, as well as remained 1 game out of the final seed for the Big 12 title game. Number 17, Oregon versus number 1, UCLA. With a win, UCLA will clinch their spot for the Pac-12 title game. For Oregon, the Pac-12 title game looks to be out of reach, but the playoffs are right there. Must win for the Ducks. Number 25, Washington versus number 16, Colorado. For both schools, the Pac-12 title game is basically out of reach at this point. The playoffs, however, are not. Colorado would be in if the season ended today. Washington can likely get there if they avoid any more losses. Big game for both schools. Number 22 Arkansas versus number 20 Mississippi State. Mississippi State controls its own destiny for the SEC title game. They win out and it's theirs. Arkansas, only a game behind the Bulldogs, can leap them in the standings and keep their SEC title game hopes alive with a win. Playoffs still well within reach for both teams. And that brings us to our pick of the week standings. A little recap from last week. Clemson went 5-0, sweeping the board. Florida and Washington went 4-1. They both lost, picking Maryland over Michigan. North Carolina went 3-2, losing Maryland to Michigan, and lost, picking themselves to beat Georgia Tech. And NC State had a rough week, going 2-3, losing Maryland, North Carolina, and also had Colorado beating UCLA. That brings us to our picks of the week for Week 9. Florida State and Clemson has 3 on Florida State, 2 on Clemson. Penn State has 4 on favor and only 1 going with Michigan State. Iowa State has 4 out of the 5 voters. UCLA has all 5 on their side. Washington has 4 of the 5 on their side. And Mississippi State has 4 of the 5 on their side. And if the season ended today, we would have 34th ranked Texas Tech taking on 33rd ranked Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. In the Outback Bowl, we'd see 32nd ranked Miami taking on 31st ranked Georgia. In the Citrus Bowl, we would see LSU taking on West Virginia. Then in the Peach Bowl, we would see Oregon State taking on Oklahoma. And in the Cotton Bowl, we would have Maryland taking on Washington. The Orange Bowl would have Virginia Tech taking on Florida. The Fiesta Bowl would have Arkansas taking on North Carolina. The Rose Bowl would have Mississippi State taking on Oklahoma State. The Sugar Bowl would have Ohio State taking on Oregon. And if the playoffs started today, number 1 UCLA would take on number 16 Colorado. Number 8 Georgia Tech would take on number 9 Arizona State. Number 5 Penn State would take on number 12 Clemson. Number 4 Kansas would take on number 13 Auburn. And number 6 Baylor would take on number 11 Florida State. Number 3 Iowa State would take on number 14 Rutgers. Number 7 Michigan versus number 10 Michigan State. And number 2 Tennessee would take on number 15 Syracuse. And that'll do it for Tino Tonight. For everybody here at Tino Studios at Buckingham Palace, I'm your host, Bucky Shanks. Good night, everybody.